How dare you think you belong here? The words cut sharper than the slap that followed, echoing through the opulent dining room of a Hamptons estate. The black woman, a brilliant marketing CEO, stood frozen as her mother-in-law's hand struck her cheek, the sting amplified by the silence of shocked guests. It was Thanksgiving, a night meant for warmth, but she faced icy glares, whispered slights about her exotic hair, and questions implying her success was unearned. An anonymous email had warned she'd never be family, yet she came, driven by love and a crucial business deal. This moment of humiliation cracked open a secret that could shatter an empire. Will she rise above the pain to forge healing? Hit that subscribe button for more gripping stories and share where you're watching from. Stay tuned. Shocking truths await. The gallery buzzed with Manhattan's elite, their champagne flutes clinking under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Amid the crowd, a woman stood out, not for her attire, but for the way her eyes danced across a vibrant canvas, seeing stories where others saw only paint. She was a marketing CEO, her firm a rising star in promoting emerging artists, her presence a testament to grit forged in a world that often dismissed her. Across the room, a man in a tailored suit lingered by the same painting, his gaze not on the crowd, but on the art itself. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a spark ignited, one that would challenge empires and unearth buried truths. She noticed him first, not for the designer label on his jacket or the watch that cost more than her annual rent, but for the way he studied the painting, a bold abstract by a Brooklyn artist. He wasn't posing for photos or networking like the others. He was present, absorbed. She approached, her voice steady despite the weight of being one of the few black faces in the room. "What do you see in it?" she asked, gesturing to the canvas. He turned, surprised, then smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Hope," he said simply, "the kind that fights to be seen." For 3 hours they talked. Art, music, dreams, oblivious to the whispers around them. "She's with him?" a woman murmured to her companion, her tone dripping with curiosity and something sharper. "Must be staff," another guest assumed, eyeing her simple but elegant dress. She ignored them, lost in his stories of wanting to capture social change through photography, a passion his family's wealth couldn't buy. She shared her own journey, growing up above her grandmother's salon, learning that beauty was in creativity, not cash. Their first date was at a hole-in-the-wall eatery in Queens. No reservations, no pretense, just spicy lentils and laughter. The waiter hesitated when seating them, his eyes flickering over her with a question he didn't voice. "Are you sure you're with him?" She brushed it off, focusing on the man across the table, who didn't mention his last name, a name that opened doors across the city. For 8 months they built a world of their own, a bubble where her background and his privilege didn't matter. They debated jazz versus hip-hop, wandered galleries at midnight, and dreamed of a future where their passions could coexist. She felt seen, not as a diversity hire or a curiosity, but as herself. But bubbles burst, and hers began to crack when she met his family. The charity gala was a sea of wealth, all tailored suits and practiced smiles. His father, a patriarch with a handshake like a contract, greeted her with charm that didn't reach his eyes. "So you run a little marketing outfit?" he asked, his tone the kind you'd use for a child's lemonade stand. She smiled, correcting him gently. "It's a firm, actually. We've placed artists in major galleries this year." He nodded, already turning to someone else, as if her success was a footnote. She caught a guest whispering, "She must have gotten in through some program." The assumption stings more than the words. Her fiancé, oblivious to the slight, beamed as he introduced her, his pride a shield against the subtle cuts. His mother, however, was less subtle. She surveyed her with a smile that felt like an appraisal, her eyes lingering on her coiled hair. "Such an interesting choice of style," she said, as if it were a bold experiment. "I keep it natural," she replied, her voice calm but firm. The older woman's smile tightened, and she moved on, leaving a chill in her wake. The proposal came on a windswept beach, the kind of scene that felt scripted for romance. He'd planned it all, musicians hidden behind dunes, roses scattered on the sand. But it was his eyes, raw with love, that made her say yes before he finished the question. She felt like she was his world, and for a moment, she believed love could conquer anything. But wedding planning revealed the fault lines. His mother had opinions on everything. The venue was too modest, the guest list too eclectic. "We need people who fit the family's image," she insisted, her words a polite way of saying her friends, artists, dreamers, people who looked like her, didn't belong. When she suggested a gospel choir from her grandmother's church, his mother's lips pursed. "Perhaps something more traditional," she countered, redirecting every piece of her heritage. He fought for her, insisting on a botanical garden venue where they'd had their third date, a place where they'd laughed under starlit trees. But even his efforts couldn't erase the feeling that she was being measured and found wanting. The slights piled up, small but sharp. At a dress fitting, a designer recommended by his mother suggested softening her look to blend better with the family's aesthetic, as if her presence was a clash of styles. A family friend asked where she'd gone to school, then raised an eyebrow when she named a state university, not an Ivy. "Impressive for someone like you," he said, the compliment laced with condescension. She swallowed the urge to snap back, focusing instead on the man who loved her. He didn't see the microaggressions, not because he didn't care, but because he'd never had to. His world had always opened doors, while hers required her to push them down. As their wedding approached, an email arrived, anonymous but venomous. "People like you will never be one of us." The words hit like a punch, but she didn't tell him. She couldn't bear to dim his joy. Instead, she threw herself into her work, securing a pitch with the family's arts foundation, a chance to fund young artists like the ones she championed. The stakes were high, her firm's future depended on it, and so did her place in his world. She spent weeks preparing, researching the foundation's board, crafting a vision that aligned with their mission but carried her signature. Yet the email lingered, a shadow over her confidence. Was it a disgruntled employee, a jealous rival, or someone closer, someone who saw her as a threat to a legacy built on exclusion? The invitation to Thanksgiving at their Hamptons estate came on heavy cardstock, formal and cold, as if she were a guest, not family. She knew it was more than a holiday, it was a test. The foundation's board would be there, and her pitch was scheduled for the following week. She spent days choosing an outfit, elegant but not flashy, professional but not stiff, knowing every detail would be scrutinized. She practiced small talk, memorized names, and even watched videos on formal dining etiquette, determined to prove she belonged. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she wondered if belonging was possible in a world that saw her as an outsider before she even spoke. He found her one night, stressed baking cookies at 2 a.m., the kitchen a mess of flour and doubt. "What's wrong?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her. She leaned into him, the warmth of his embrace a fleeting anchor. "I just want them to see me," she whispered. "They will," he promised, his voice full of conviction. "They'll see how incredible you are." But she wasn't so sure. The email's words echoed, and the weight of his family's world pressed harder. She wasn't just fighting for their approval, she was fighting for her place, her work, her love. As they drove to the Hamptons, her heart raced, not with hope, but with the resolve to face whatever came. She didn't know then that the night would break open secrets, that a single moment would test her strength and set the stage for a reckoning that could change everything. As they drove to the Hamptons, her heart raced, not with hope, but with the resolve to face whatever came. She didn't know then that the night would break open secrets, that a single moment would test her strength and set the stage for a reckoning that could change everything. The car hummed along the coastal road, the ocean a dark expanse under the November sky, and she clutched her purse, the anonymous email's words, "People like you will never be one of us," burning in her mind. She glanced at her husband, his hands steady on the wheel, his smile a quiet reassurance. But she knew this Thanksgiving at his family's estate wasn't just a holiday. It was a battlefield, and she was walking in unarmed. The Hale estate loomed like a fortress, its marble steps gleaming under the moonlight, the circular driveway lined with cars that screamed wealth. She stepped out, her tailored dress, a deep burgundy, elegant but understated, feeling like armor she wasn't sure would hold. She'd spent weeks preparing, from memorizing the guest list to studying the Hale Arts Foundation's board members, whose approval she needed for her firm's pitch next week. Every detail was calculated. Her heels low enough to avoid seeming flashy, her jewelry simple but tasteful. She'd even watched etiquette videos, practicing how to hold a wine glass to avoid judgment. Her husband squeezed her hand as they approached the door, whispering, "You've got this." But the weight of being the only black woman in a sea of privilege pressed against her chest. His mother answered the door, her pearls glinting, her smile a practiced mask that didn't touch her eyes. "Welcome, dear," she said, offering an air kiss that felt more like a formality than affection. "You've certainly made an effort." The comment landed like a needle, sharp and precise, implying her effort was an anomaly. She swallowed the sting, nodding politely, and stepped into the great room, where relatives and family friends mingled, their voices a low hum of wealth and status. The men discussed stock portfolios and golf handicaps. The women traded stories of charity galas and European vacations. She tried to join a conversation about art, mentioning a recent exhibit she'd curated, but a cousin cut her off mid-sentence. "Oh, that's quaint," he said, turning to someone else, as if her work was a hobby, not a career. At dinner, the dining room stretched like a cathedral, its long table set with crystal and silver that gleamed under chandeliers. She was seated between an elderly uncle who smelled of cigars and a family friend named Patricia, whose fascination with her hair was immediate and unsettling. "It's so unique," Patricia said, her fingers hovering as if tempted to touch. "Do you use special products for that texture?" The question, cloaked in curiosity, felt like a spotlight on her difference. "Just regular shampoo," she replied, forcing a smile, her voice steady despite the urge to flinch. Her husband, seated across the table, caught her eye and winked, a small gesture that anchored her. But the room felt like a maze of judgment, every glance a reminder that she was being watched, evaluated, found wanting. The meal progressed, a parade of dishes she'd researched to ensure she knew the proper way to eat them. She answered questions about her work with practiced ease, though each response was met with polite nods or subtle dismissals. "Your little firm sounds ambitious," an aunt remarked, her tone suggesting ambition was a surprise for someone like her. Another guest asked about her education, then raised an eyebrow when she mentioned a state university. "Oh, you must have worked so hard to get where you are," he said, the compliment laced with an assumption she'd heard too many times, that her success was an exception, not a rule. She gripped her fork tighter, her smile unwavering, but inside she felt like she was shouting into a void. The tension built like a storm, invisible to most but suffocating to her. She tried to blend in, laughing at the right moments, nodding at stories of yacht trips and private schools, but her presence seemed to disrupt the room's rhythm. Conversations shifted when she spoke, eyes darted away, and silences lingered too long. Her husband sensed her unease, his hand finding hers under the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. It was a small act of love, a reminder of why she was here, not just for the foundation's approval, but for him, for them. As dessert was served, he leaned over, his voice warm with pride. "She's going to blow the board away next week," he said to the table, his smile bright. "Her vision for young artists is incredible." For a moment she felt seen, her shoulders relaxing under his gaze. Then, without thinking, he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, a gesture so natural, so unremarkable between them that she barely registered it. But the room froze. The clink of silverware stopped, the hum of conversation died, and every eye turned to them. She looked up to see his mother standing, her face pale as her pearls, her wine glass trembling in her hand. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice ablade. For a moment she thought the words were aimed at her, but his mother's eyes were locked on her son. "How dare you do this in my house in front of our family?" Her voice rose sharp and raw, cracking the polished facade she'd worn all night. Her husband stood, confusion etching his face. "Mom, what are you talking about?" The room held its breath. His mother's composure shattered, years of restraint unraveling in seconds. "I've watched you throw away everything we stand for," she hissed, her eyes darting to her daughter-in-law, the unspoken accusation clear. This, this display in my home. His father stood, his voice low. Margaret, please. But she cut him off, her words a whip. No, I'm done pretending. The guests stared, some with shock, others with morbid fascination, as she moved toward the couple, her steps quick and unsteady. Before anyone could react, her hand rose, and her palm connected with the young woman's cheek, a sharp crack that echoed through the silent room. The pain was immediate, a burning sting, but the humiliation cut deeper, a wound witnessed by 20 pairs of eyes. Her husband moved like lightning, stepping between them, his voice low and dangerous. Get away from her, now! His mother stumbled back, her hands shaking, her face a mask of rage and something deeper. Grief, perhaps, or guilt. The room erupted in whispers, chairs scraping as guests shifted uncomfortably. The young woman touched her cheek, the heat of the slap lingering, her mind racing to process the attack. She wanted to vanish, to escape the eyes boring into her, but her feet stayed rooted, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just a guest here. She was his wife, and she wouldn't crumble. His sister Sophia was at her side in an instant, her face pale but determined. Come with me, she whispered, her hand gentle on her arm. Please. She let Sophia lead her out, away from the suffocating dining room, through a hallway lined with stern family portraits, and into a small study that smelled of leather and old books. Sophia closed the door, her eyes bright with tears. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. You didn't deserve that. None of this. She reached into her purse, pulling out a faded photograph and a delicate silver necklace engraved with H.E. There's something you need to know, Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. About my mother, about why she did this. 30 years ago, she loved someone her family didn't approve of. A black man. They forced her to give up their daughter, Hope Elizabeth. The young woman stared at the photograph, her heart pounding as recognition dawned. The name, the story. It wasn't just a secret. It was a connection to someone she knew, someone whose life had been shaped by the same pain now burning in her cheek. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of the revelation pressing against her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about a truth that could unravel everything. In the dim light of the study, the silver necklace engraved with H.E. glinted in Sophia's trembling hand, a fragile link to a past that had erupted into the present. She took a steadying breath, her mind racing but resolute. She wouldn't wait for someone else to fix this. This was her fight now, and she'd face it head on, for herself, for her husband, and for the woman whose name echoed in her heart, Hope Elizabeth. The study's heavy silence was broken only by the faint hum of voices from the dining room, where the Thanksgiving chaos lingered. Sophia's eyes, wet with tears, searched her face for a reaction. I didn't know how to tell you, Sophia said, her voice soft but urgent. Mom never talks about it. I only found that photo by accident years ago, hidden in her jewelry box. The young woman traced the edges of the photograph, the image of a young couple, his mother decades younger, and a black man in a military uniform, searing itself into her mind. The name Hope Elizabeth wasn't just familiar. It was a key to a door she'd never expected to open. Her best friend, a doctor in Boston, had spent years searching for her birth mother, her birth name etched in adoption papers. Hope Elizabeth. The coincidence was staggering, but she didn't believe in coincidences. This was fate, and she'd seize it. She set the photograph down, her cheek still stinging from the slap, but her resolve hardening like steel. I need to make a call, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Sophia nodded, stepping back to give her space. She pulled out her phone and dialed, her fingers trembling as she waited for the familiar voice. It's me, she said when the call connected. I need you to listen carefully. Her friend's voice, warm but cautious, came through. What's wrong? You sound shaken. She took a breath, the words tumbling out. The slap, the necklace, the name Hope Elizabeth. There was a long pause, then a whisper. That's my birth name. You're sure? She was sure. The pieces fit too perfectly. Her friend's adoption story, the sealed records, the years of searching. I need you to come to New York, she said. I think we found your mother. Hanging up, she felt the weight of what she'd set in motion. This wasn't just about her place in her husband's family anymore. It was about righting a wrong buried for decades. But she needed help, someone who knew how to navigate pain and prejudice with wisdom. She called Aunt Lorraine, the woman who'd raised her after her parents passed, whose salon had been her childhood haven. Lorraine's voice was a balm, steady and no nonsense. "Baby, what's got you calling at this hour?" She recounted the night, the microaggressions, the slap, the revelation about Hope Elizabeth. Lorraine listened, then sighed. "I've been there, child. Years ago, I pitched to a gallery, and the owner said my ideas were too urban for their clients. They didn't see me, just their assumptions. You're stronger than that, but you need a plan." Lorraine's advice was clear. Document everything, find proof, and don't let emotion cloud her strategy. The next step was to verify the truth. She contacted a lawyer she'd worked with on artist contracts, a woman who specialized in adoption law and knew how to crack sealed records. "This is delicate," the lawyer warned over the phone. "If the family paid to bury this, it won't be easy to uncover. I'll need time and any evidence you have." She sent a photo of the necklace and the faded picture, her mind racing with possibilities. What if the records confirmed it? What if her friend was the daughter her mother-in-law had given up? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, a bridge between her pain and a chance for healing. But she couldn't rush this. She needed to be precise, to protect her friend and herself from the fallout. Back in her apartment, she paced the living room, the city skyline glittering through the window. Her husband sat on the couch, his face a mix of anger and guilt. "I should have seen this coming," he said, his voice tight. "Mom's been cold, but I never thought she'd, He trailed off, unable to say the word. She knelt beside him, taking his hands. "This isn't your fault, but we need to do this right. For us and for her." He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "What's the plan?" She outlined her steps, the call to her friend, the lawyer's investigation, and a meeting she'd arrange on neutral ground. "I'm not letting your mother's pain destroy us," she said, "and I'm not letting her past stay buried if it means someone else is hurting." The next day, her friend confirmed she'd fly in from Boston. "I've been looking for her my whole life," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm scared. What if she doesn't want me?" The young woman's heart ached, remembering her friend's late-night college confessions about adoption, about wondering if her birth mother regretted letting her go. "She's carrying something heavy," she said gently. "I saw it in her eyes last night. She doesn't hate you. She's afraid of what she lost." They planned the meeting at her apartment, a safe space where no one could interrupt or judge. She wanted it to be private, intimate, a chance for truth without the spectacle of the Hale estate. Arranging the meeting was like walking a tightrope. She called her mother-in-law, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk," she said. "Not at your house, mine. Tomorrow." The older woman's voice was shaky, raw from the night before. "I don't know what came over me," she said, her apology halting. I can't explain it." The young woman didn't push. Explanations could wait. "Tomorrow," she repeated and hung up. She spent the day preparing, tidying her apartment, and setting out a simple spread of coffee and pastries. She wanted no pretense, no echoes of the Hale's opulence. This was about honesty, not performance. When her mother-in-law arrived, she looked smaller, her pearls replaced by a plain sweater, her eyes red-rimmed. They sat across from each other, the silence heavy. "I'm sorry," her mother-in-law began, her voice breaking. "What I did last night, it wasn't about you." The young woman leaned forward, her cheeks still tender, but her resolve unshaken. "Then tell me what it was about." The older woman hesitated, then spoke, her words spilling like a dam breaking. She told of a love forbidden by her parents, a black man whose name she could barely say, a pregnancy that threatened her family's approval. "They made me give her up," she whispered, tears falling. "Hope Elizabeth. I named her before they took her." The young woman listened, her heart pounding, but her face calm. When the story ended, she slid the photograph across the table. "Is this her?" Her mother-in-law's hands trembled as she touched the image, a sob escaping her. "Yes," she said. "How did you—" Before she could finish, the doorbell rang. Her friend stepped inside, her eyes wide, her posture stiff with nerves. The two women locked eyes and time seemed to stop. "Hope?" her mother-in-law whispered, her voice raw with longing. "It's me," her friend replied, her voice soft but steady. "But I go by another name now." They stood inches apart, years of pain and separation hanging between them. The young woman stepped back, letting them find their way, her heart swelling with the weight of what she'd made possible. The meeting stretched into hours, tears mingling with tentative questions. Her mother-in-law apologized again and again for the choice she'd made, for the slap that had brought them here. Her friend listened, her forgiveness cautious but real, a bridge built on shared loss. The young woman watched, her own pain fading in the face of this reunion. She'd taken a wound and turned it into a chance for healing, but she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The truth was out, but its ripples were just beginning. As she stood in her apartment, watching her mother-in-law and her best friend, newly revealed as mother and daughter, navigate their fragile first steps, she felt a shift. The air was heavy with possibility, but also with danger. She'd opened a door to truth, but not everyone in the Hale family would welcome it. Her phone buzzed, a news alert flashing. Hale family scandal. Condo sparks controversy. Her stomach dropped. The world was watching now, and the fight for her place, her work, in this newfound family was far from over. The next morning, the city's tabloids screamed with headlines. "Condow lowers Hale legacy," one blared, quoting an anonymous source, claiming she was unfit for the family's pristine image. The words stung, echoing the venomous email she'd received weeks ago. She scrolled through the articles, each one twisting the Thanksgiving incident into a narrative of her inadequacy, her outsider status laid bare for public consumption. At her firm, her team gathered, their faces tense. "This could tank our pitch to the Hale Arts Foundation," her assistant said, voice low. "They're already skittish about optics." She nodded, her jaw tight. She'd built her company from nothing, championing artists others overlooked, but now her own identity was being weaponized against her. She wouldn't let it win. Her husband stormed into the office, his face dark with fury. "This is my father's doing," he said, slamming a tablet on her desk, open to another damning article. "He's trying to control the narrative, to push you out." She met his eyes, seeing the fire that mirrored her own. "Then we push back," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Together?" He nodded, his hand finding hers, a silent vow to stand by her. But the stakes were higher now. Not just their marriage, but her firm's future and the fragile reunion she'd orchestrated. She needed leverage, and she needed it fast. Sophia, her sister-in-law, arrived an hour later, her face pale but determined. "I found something," she said, pulling a laptop from her bag. "Emails from Dad's personal account." She opened a folder, revealing a chain of messages from decades ago. The words were chilling. Payments to a private agency, instructions to seal adoption records, threats to ensure silence. "He paid to bury Hope's existence," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "He knew about Mom's daughter and made sure no one would find her." The young woman's breath caught. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a cover-up, orchestrated by her father-in-law to protect the Hale name. The emails were a weapon, and she'd wield them carefully. She called a meeting with her lawyer, the same one digging into the adoption records. "These emails change everything," the lawyer said, scanning the documents. "They're proof of intent to conceal. We can use them to pressure him into opening the records." The young woman nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't just fighting for her friend's truth now. She was fighting a system that valued image over integrity. But she knew her father-in-law wouldn't yield easily. He'd already threatened to pull funding from her firm's project, a lifeline for young artists she'd spent years nurturing. At a recent foundation meeting, a board member had whispered to him, loud enough for her to hear, "We need a face that aligns with our brand." The implication was clear. She wasn't it, her blackness a liability in their polished world. She refused to shrink. Instead, she crafted a plan, bold and unyielding. She invited her in-laws to her apartment again, this time with a purpose sharper than reconciliation. When they arrived, her father-in-law's posture was rigid, his eyes cold. "This has gone far enough," he said, his voice clipped. "You're dragging our family through the mud." Her mother-in-law sat silently, her hands clasped, still raw from the previous day's revelations. The young woman stood, her presence commanding despite the tension. "You don't get to decide what's enough," she said. "Not anymore." She laid out her conditions, each one a brick in the wall she was building against their resistance. First, her father-in-law would sign an order to unseal the adoption records, giving her friend access to her full history. Second, her mother-in-law would deliver a private apology to her friend for the years of absence and the pain of the slap. Third, the Hale family would issue a public statement denouncing their history of exclusionary standards, acknowledging the harm done. Finally, the Hale Arts Foundation would establish a new fund for underrepresented artists, with her firm overseeing its transparent promotion. Her father-in-law laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "You think you can dictate terms to us?" he asked. "Your project's funding is on the line. One call, and it's gone." She didn't flinch. "And one email leak," she said, sliding a printed copy of his old messages across the table. "Will show the world what you did to keep a child hidden." His face paled, the arrogance draining from his eyes. Sophia stepped forward, her voice firm. "I found those emails, Dad. I won't let you bury this again." Her husband stood beside her, his presence a solid wall of support. "This isn't just about her," he said. "It's about doing what's right. For our family, for the truth." The room was a battleground of silence, each second stretching taut. Her mother-in-law broke it, her voice soft but resolute. "She's right," she said, looking at her husband. "We've hidden too long. I won't lose my daughter again because of your pride." The weight of her words shifted the air, a crack in the Hale facade. Her father-in-law's shoulders slumped, his resistance crumbling under the combined force of his wife, his son, and the evidence before him. "Fine," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'll sign." She handed him the legal document, drafted by her lawyer, and watched as his pen moved across the page. Each stroke a victory she'd fought for. But the fight wasn't over. The tabloids continued their assault, fueled by sources close to the family. At a coffee shop, she overheard a customer reading aloud. "She's using her race to shame the Hales into submission." The words cut, but she turned them into fuel. She reached out to her network, artists, journalists, community leaders, sharing her vision for the new fund and the truth about the Hales' past. Social media buzzed, posts calling out the family's hypocrisy gaining traction. A young artist she'd mentored tweeted, "Her firm gave me a chance when no one else would. She's not tearing down the Hales. She's building something better." The public pressure mounted, a tide she'd helped stir, forcing the Hales to act. Her husband worked alongside her, drafting a statement for the family to release. "We can't undo the past," he said, typing furiously, "but we can own it." Together, they crafted a message that was raw and unpolished, a departure from the Hales' usual gloss. "Our family has made mistakes, rooted in prejudice and fear. We commit to change, starting with transparency and support for all artists." Sophia added her voice, sharing the statement with her own followers, her influence amplifying their reach. The young woman watched the online response grow, a mix of skepticism and hope, knowing this was only the beginning. As the day of the foundation's board meeting approached, she prepared her pitch with renewed fire. The new fund would be her legacy, not just a project, but a statement that talent transcended background. She met with her team, refining every slide, ensuring the numbers were airtight. "This isn't just about art," she told them. "It's about proving we belong." Her assistant nodded, her eyes fierce. "They'll see you this time," she said. "They have to." The young woman smiled, her confidence tempered by the battles she'd already fought. She'd faced a slap, a family's disdain, and a public smear campaign. Now, with her husband and Sophia by her side, and the truth as her weapon, she was ready to demand more than acceptance. She was demanding change. The young woman smiled, her confidence tempered by the battles she'd already fought. She'd faced a slap, a family's disdain, and a public smear campaign. Now, with her husband and Sophia by her side, and the truth as her weapon, she was ready to demand more than acceptance. She was demanding change. The Hale Arts Foundation's boardroom loomed ahead, a battleground of polished mahogany and skeptical eyes. But she walked in with the poise of a general, her presentation a manifesto for a future where talent trumped prejudice. Today, she wasn't just pitching a fund for underrepresented artists, she was rewriting the rules of a legacy that had tried to erase her. The air crackled with anticipation, and as she took her place at the head of the table, she knew this moment would redefine not just her place in the Hale family, but the family itself. The boardroom was a study in contrast, sleek glass walls reflecting the Manhattan skyline, and a table of faces reflecting decades of tradition. She stood tall, her tailored suit a nod to professionalism, but her coiled hair unapologetically her own. As she launched into her pitch, her voice was steady, each word a brick in the foundation she was building. This fund, she said, will amplify voices the art world has ignored. Artists of color, queer artists, those from communities deemed unmarketable. My firm will ensure every dollar is transparent, every artist seen. The slides behind her showcased success stories, painters and sculptors her team had elevated from obscurity to gallery walls. But the room wasn't silent. Murmurs rippled, and she caught a board member's whisper. "She's pushing too hard for diversity. It's a risk to our brand." She met his gaze unflinching. "Talent isn't a risk," she countered. "Exclusion is." Her husband sat in the back, his presence a quiet anchor. He'd spent days curating a photography exhibit to accompany the fund's announcement, a visual narrative of their family's reckoning. Each image was a chapter: the slap that shattered a dinner, the necklace etched with HE, the tentative embrace of a mother and daughter reunited. He'd titled it "Light Through the Crack," a testament to the truth breaking through decades of silence. As she spoke, she felt his belief in her, a warmth that steadied her against the board's skepticism. Sophia was there too, her laptop open, ready to share the family's public statement if the board wavered. The young woman knew the stakes. This wasn't just about funding. It was about forcing the Hales to live up to the promises she'd extracted. The presentation ended, and the questions came, some sharp with doubt. "How do we know this won't alienate our core donors?" one board member asked, his tone implying her vision was a gamble. She smiled, her response measured but cutting. "Donors want impact. My firm's track record shows we deliver it. Or are you suggesting only certain artists deserve a spotlight?" The room shifted, her words landing like a challenge. Another board member, an older woman, leaned forward. "You're awfully confident for someone so new to this circle," she said, her compliment laced with condescension. "I'm confident because I've earned it," she replied, her eyes steady. "My firm's results speak louder than my background." The room fell quiet, her authority undeniable. As the board deliberated, she stepped outside, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. Her husband joined her, his hand finding hers. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with pride. "They can't ignore you now." Sophia followed, her face alight with determination. "They're rattled," she said, "but they're listening." The young woman nodded, knowing the board's decision was only part of the victory. The real triumph was the event tonight, the public unveiling of the fund, where the Hales would face the world in their own past. The evening arrived, the foundation's gallery transformed into a stage. Guests milled under soft lighting, their chatter a mix of curiosity and caution. Her husband's exhibit lined the walls, each photograph a raw, unfiltered truth. The first showed the dining room's stunned silence, the moment of the slap captured in blurred motion. Another framed the necklace, its HE glinting like a beacon. The final image was a close-up of two hands, clasped, one older, one younger. A mother and daughter finding each other. Guests lingered, their whispers shifting from gossip to awe. She overheard a critic murmur, "This is more than art. It's a reckoning." Her heart swelled. Her husband had turned their pain into a story the world couldn't ignore. She took the stage, her presence commanding. "Tonight," she began, "we launch a fund to uplift artists who've been overlooked, not because of their talent, but because of who they are. This is the Hale Arts Foundation's commitment to change." The applause was polite but tentative, the room waiting for the family's response. Her mother-in-law stepped forward, her usual pearls absent, replaced by the silver necklace engraved with HE. She looked at her daughter, standing nearby, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "I lost someone once," she said, her eyes locking on her daughter. "I let fear and prejudice take her from me. Tonight, I reclaim her." She unclasped the necklace and placed it around her daughter's neck, the gesture drawing gasps from the crowd. Turning to the young woman, she added, "And I thank you for opening a door I was too afraid to touch." Her daughter, the doctor from Boston, stood tall, the necklace glinting against her skin. She didn't speak, but her presence was enough, a living testament to the truth unveiled. The young woman felt tears prick her eyes, not from pain, but from the weight of what they'd built together. Her father-in-law remained in the shadows, his signature on the adoption records a reluctant concession, but his silence tonight spoke volumes. The public statement, released hours earlier, was trending online, its raw honesty cutting through the Hale's polished veneer. "We've made mistakes," it read, "but we choose growth over pride." The young woman had shaped every word, her vision, now the family's voice. The night ended with a vow renewal, a quiet ceremony in the botanical garden where she and her husband had once dreamed of their future. The air was crisp, scented with roses and possibility. She'd baked cookies using her grandmother's recipe, their warmth a nod to her roots. Sophia laughed freely, her usual caution replaced by joy. Her new boyfriend at her side, a man who made her glow. Her husband's sister-in-law, now her friend, shared a knowing smile, their bond forged in truth. Her best friend, now her sister-in-law, called her husband brother, a word that carried years of longing. He grinned, teaching her the basics of photography between bites of cookie, their laughter a new family melody. Her mother-in-law raised a glass, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Family isn't about who shares your name," she said, looking at the young woman. "It's about who stays when the truth is laid bare." The words were a balm, a recognition of the young woman's role in their healing. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was the architect of this moment, the one who'd turned a slap into a bridge. As she stood beside her husband, his arm around her, she felt the weight of her victories, her firm's future secured, her team's trust intact, and a family redefined by courage, not convention. The garden glowed under the stars, a testament to what love could build when it chose truth over fear. What did this story stir in you? A tale of pain transformed into healing, of a woman who turned a slap into a bridge for truth. Did it resonate, challenge, or inspire you? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share what moved you or how you faced your own battles for belonging. Your voice matters, and we're grateful you joined us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being here, for witnessing a family redefined by courage and love. We can't wait to share more tales of triumph with you next time. Stay tuned, and until then, keep choosing truth over fear. See you soon.